welcome to Sarah's Stamping Retreat. Today we're going to be creating a cute present card using an inky embossing folder technique with the embossing folder of the month from Spellbinders and the stitching day of the month from Spellbinders. So you may have seen this card that I created last week, and we're going to create one really similar to this with a completely different look. So on this one we used gilding polish, and we're going to use a different inky technique on the embossing folder this time, a different embossing folder. This is the 3D embossing folder of the month. And you see here, I used these same dies, but I didn't do the stitching on them. So we're going to do the stitching on them today. So for this card, we used all the pieces without these stitching pieces inside. For today's card, I've used all the pieces with the stitching inside. So you can see, for example, that without the stitching piece inside, this creates this look, and with it, it creates this look with the holes to stitch and the embossed lines so you can see where your thread's supposed to go. So these dies are the ones we're going to use today to create the bow. You also get these ones which you can create either stitch pieces, you could add this piece on the top, and you could create that as a pattern. They're designed to go behind the bow like this down the card to kind of be like the wrapping paper, but I think you could also use them nicely as the kind of like piece of ribbon that goes behind if you're making a square card, for example. And there's some really nice things you could do with that. So let's do our inky embossing technique first of all. So then the front of my embossing folder is this bit that says Spellbinders. So I'm going to ink up the front of my embossing folder. I'm going to use the Alpine Aster fresh dye ink from Alpine, and I'm just going to ink up my brayer, and then I'm going to add that ink to the front of my embossing folder. So then I've got a piece of cardstock the same size as my card front, and I'm going to pop that in there and run it through my die cutting machine. So then you can see we've got this lovely panel with the blue embossed background. So then I'm going to make up my bow, and you can see I've stitched some of them already because a lot of them use the same stitch. So all of these pieces here just use this straight up and down stitch, so I'll show you that on this piece. So I'm just going to secure the thread behind it with a piece of tape, and then all I need to do is come up to the front and go down to the back, and then I'm going to come up the next hole and go back down, and every single one of these pieces is done in the same way. And obviously I'm just showing you the way to do it as it's designed, so I'm following the embossed lines on the pieces. If you're really into your stitching, then you might want to try different things. This is just the way that they've kind of shown to do it on the dies. And then I can just attach it with tape at the back again. So then this centre piece is the only one that's done in this way. So I'm going to attach that at the back. And this one we want to come up the middle and then go down each of the outside holes in turn. So I'm coming up the middle each time and going down the outside hole. And I'm just doing a tone on tone look here, but you could do different colours, you could do metallic threads. There are all sorts of possibilities for how you want your bow to look. So I'm using 2 strands of thread for each of these, by the way. If you're not used to doing embroidery, then embroidery thread comes with 6 strands altogether, so you can just pull it apart to take 2 strands out. So then for these tails of the bow, which look like that, it's a very similar stitch to the first one that we did, but this time you've got more than one going into each hole. So we'll go up here, and we'll go down here, we'll go up the one next to it and back into the same hole. And it's very easy to know what to do because there's embossed lines, so you can just follow the embossed lines. Then we're going to go across, and we're going to go down, we're going to go across and up back into that second hole. So you've got 2 strands going into each of these holes. Then the middle one just has 1 strand going into it, so that's just a straight stitch down. And then the other side's the same as the first side, so we're going to go 2 into each one. 2 strands going into that one, 2 strands going into that one, 1 into the middle, 2 on the other end. And you can see that even though it looks like there's a lot of stitching on this bow, each piece only takes a couple of minutes at the most. So now that I've got all my pieces, I can start gluing them together. So I'm going to start by gluing these pieces onto the bow. So I've cut these pieces in just a slightly darker shade of pink, just to add a kind of shadow effect. So I'm going to glue this piece into the centre of these 2 pieces. Those two get glued underneath. And then these 2 pieces are going to be glued underneath there. I'm just going to pop that over there just to help them adhere a bit easier. So now I've got my card front. I'm going to add this panel to it. I might actually just cut this panel down very slightly so there's a tiny white edge around the outside. So then I'm going to use the stamp set of the month, which is this really nice sentiment stamp set, which is going to be a staple of mine for Christmas. And I'm going to be using this Sending Here and Christmas Wishes. I think Sending Snowflake Kisses would also be really nice. So I've got this blue cardstock and I'm just going to heat emboss them in white onto the blue cardstock. Now I think you can really tell when you've got a nice quality stamp set. It makes such a difference because the stamps are quite solid rather than being like really bendy, so you get a nice straight line with them. And then I'll heat emboss that with white embossing powder. So I'm going to turn this over and I'm going to make some marks on the back. I'm doing it in red pen because I want you to be able to see them, but I would advise doing them in pencil. And then I'm just going to join those marks up so that I get a nice kind of pointy end for my tag. So I want this to be like a present tag on the present. So then I'm going to glue these pieces onto the front of my card. And then I'm going to add on my bow. And I'll add on these pieces that go behind it as well. And then I'm just going to add some foam pads behind my tag. And then I'm just going to add this onto here. So there's my finished card. And you can see that although we use the same layout, we've got a really different look to the card that I made last week. Let me know in the comments which you prefer, the one with the stitching or the one without the stitching. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, I'd appreciate you clicking like below, and you can also press subscribe if you'd like to see future videos. If you press the bell button and select all, then YouTube will also notify you when I've got a new video available. All of the products that I've used for today's card are listed in the description below. There's also a link there to my blog where you can find a picture supply list if that helps you find what you're looking for. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you again soon.